24 or 25 Celsius possible in places, feeling warm in the sun, but there'll be less sun around on Thursday morning, a bit more cloud across eastern, central and southern England as well as East Wales. Once again, that cloud should retreat back to the east coast through the afternoon, but in some places it could stick around for most of the day. Friday, plenty of showers developing across England and Wales, drier and sunnier further north.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win a £36,000 secret salary in the latest Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Take a year off and keep it to yourself. You don't even need to tell the taxman, as it's totally tax-free. For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation. Tonight, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy has eccentrically warned that global warming is a bigger threat to the world than terrorism as he launches the Global Clean Power Alliance. The Business Secretary has equally eccentrically claimed that Labour's planned right to work from home will boost productivity. In fact, he'll be dooming Britain to a future of low productivity and idleness. The Prime Minister has defended his long list of freebies in an attempt to obscure the fact that all of his benefactors are seeking one thing from him: influence. And for tonight's finale that you really won't want to miss, the great Brexit debate, a new report has suggested that Brexit has hit the British economy, and the BBC, as ever, has swallowed it hook, line and sinker. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Lazar. As ever, it's a crucial part of the programme. Let me know your views, mailmog at gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Jacob, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 8 o'clock. In Lebanon, at least 9 people have been killed and 2,700 injured, including members of the Hezbollah terrorist group, when their pages exploded today. You can see here footage appearing to show the moment one of the devices exploded. It's being described as the biggest security breach so far in nearly a year of conflict with Israel. Hezbollah claim Israel is to blame for the pager blast, adding they'll get their fair punishment. The Israeli military say top commanders have held a situational assessment today. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has confirmed the US Defense Secretary spoke with his Israeli counterpart today as they continue to assess what happened. Now, back in the UK, the government says it's tackling small boat crossings on all fronts following news that 10,000 people have crossed the Channel in small boats since Labour came to power in July. Home Office figures show 65 more migrants arrived on Monday, bringing the year's total to nearly 23,600, though that's down 1% from this time last year. The latest crossings follow the deaths of 8 migrants over the weekend as the government boosts funding for border security. Home Secretary Yvette Coopers announced £75 million for more officers, cameras and technology to combat people smuggling. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says he's also looking at Italy's immigration policies for possible solutions. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks the first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. This morning, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, told us her party still think more can be done.
Part of the answer is pay, but as I say, it's just a first step. What we Liberal Democrats want to see is a really ambitious budget in October. We want the Labour government to use the budget to be a budget to save our NHS and care services, and as part of that we want to see an increase in day-to-day spending, not by taxing struggling families but by reversing the tax cuts for the big banks and closing the loopholes in capital gains tax so the wealthiest pay a little bit more. But we also want to see borrowing to repair our crumbling hospitals and GP surgeries too.
And finally, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has said climate change is a more fundamental threat than terrorism. That's in his maiden speech given this afternoon. He said that although the climate issue may not feel as urgent as terrorism, it is pervasive and accelerating towards us at pace, assuring the public that it will be central to all Foreign Office does. Mr Lammy also announced the government would launch a global initiative to accelerate the rollout of clean energy. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Addressing an event at Kew Gardens today for the launch of the Labour Party's so-called Global Clean Power Alliance, the Foreign Secretary said this.
Today I'm committing to you that while I am Foreign Secretary, action on the climate and nature crisis will be central to all that the Foreign Office does.
You may wonder why the Foreign Secretary is involving himself with global warming rather than dealing with the nation's friends and enemies. Unfortunately, in a speech that droned on for about 40 minutes, this wasn't really made clear. However, his speech made 3 fundamental points. Here was the first.
We will build a global clean power alliance. This government has set a landmark goal to be the first major economy to deliver clean power by 2030.
Labour's absurd plans to decarbonise the grid by 2030 have been estimated to cost £100 billion more than the last government's merely foolish plan. The grid is already made hugely inefficient because of net zero. Instead of constantly running our gas power stations, we intermittently turn them on and off, depending on whether the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. This process means suppliers charge higher rates for energy because of the unreliable supply available. These costs are passed on to consumers, that's you, and businesses. But crucially, in 5.5 years' time, there will be, as there is now, plenty of occasions when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. So if Labour wants fully to decarbonise the grid, what's it plan to do when there is no renewable energy being generated? The answer is blackouts. Next, the Foreign Secretary said this.
Second, we must unlock much, much more climate and nature finance.
What a lovely word, unlock, carefully used. If he's referring to public money, that means more taxes. You'll pay higher taxes. But if he means private money, it presumes that the markets are interested in the net zero projects. But they're only interested in them with a high rate of return, which will fall on consumers, making energy even more expensive. This was shown in the recent auction for onshore and offshore wind, where the prices were much higher than they are for continuous gas generation. Equally, consumers are not so easy to fool, as shown by electric car sales, which are falling short of targets, meaning suppliers are having to ration sales of petrol and diesel cars. Finally, the Foreign Secretary said this.
Third, we must not just halt, but reverse the decline in biodiversity. So we are completely committed to ratifying the High Seas Treaty and to securing agreement on a plastics treaty.
So the solution, as always with the socialists, is more cost and regulation. The economy is to be burdened and the consumer overcharged. Bear in mind, our electricity is already twice the price of that of the United States. This is all based on a doom-laden view of the future, which seems to be becoming Labour's speciality.
The threat may not feel as urgent as a terrorist or an imperialist autocrat, but it is more fundamental. It is systemic, it's pervasive, and accelerating towards us at pace.
The Labour Party's net zero plans are not only based on fallacy after fallacy, but they will destroy and weaken the British economy, force taxes up, and make all of us, the British people, cold and poor. As ever, let me know your views. Email mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm very pleased now to be joined by Tom Burke, the former chairman and now non-executive director of the think tank E3G. Now, Tom, you're a very sensible man. That's why I like to invite you onto this programme. But surely to say that global warming is more serious than Putin and terrorism means that people won't take the Foreign Secretary seriously. It may be serious. It may be a major problem. But what Putin's doing in Ukraine and the risk to the security of Europe, the risk potentially of a Third World War, and what's been going on in Israel is a fundamental and immediate concern.
I completely agree with you about those being fundamental and immediate, and that's exactly what the Foreign Secretary said. What he said was there are more urgent problems, but this one is fundamental. So I'm rather glad we have a Foreign Secretary who's able to look beyond the immediate and urgent and also think about the longer-term problems that are coming towards us that we can't escape.
But terrorism is a long-term problem. There have been terrorist attacks going back decades. So to pretend that that's a problem that will disappear
No, I
is simply wrong.
didn't say that, and he didn't say that. I just said it's an
implicit.
No, I've just
it's
said
both urgent and fundamental.
No, wait, no, but let's be really clear. I said it's urgent. I agree with the Foreign Secretary on that. It's very urgent.
And fundamental.
I didn't say anything about how long we have to go on. Actually, we've been dealing with it for a very long time, and we'll probably, especially if we fail to deal with climate change, we'll be having a lot more terrorism. So you're quite right to be worried about terrorism.
This is the classic alarmism. That
I'm not.
You've just brought it in.
Now you're saying I'm not only an eccentric, I'm also an alarmist.
I haven't called you eccentric. I called Lammy eccentric.
You did.
Climate change becomes responsible for everything. Whatever happens, we have a warm summer, it's climate change. We have a cold summer, it's climate change. We have terrorism, it's climate change. The logic behind this just doesn't stack up.
You're reading the wrong papers. That's not what I said. Well,
that's just what you said. You said terrorism will be made worse by climate change. Why?
Yes, I didn't. I'll tell you exactly why. Because if climate policy fails, we will lose food and water security in a world in which most people now live in cities. And if you think a failure to deliver food and water security to cities won't lead to an increase in terrorism, you've not really been paying attention to what causes terrorism.
But then I don't accept your fundamental premise. But if you look, you're basically following Malthus's line that essentially agriculture will not be able to keep up with the population, and that changes in climate are the equivalent of what Malthus was saying. Actually, agricultural productivity has been able to keep up and surpass growth in population, and for every bit of warming you will have some parts of the world that are more fertile and some that are less. So it changes.
Well, that may be your opinion, but it's not one that's shared by most of the scientists who deal with these issues.
Well, it is, because they're already saying that there'll be better opportunity for growing grapes in England. This is part of the change.
Yeah, and people today are paying more for their olive oil because we haven't dealt with climate change. So what's the trade-off here?
But that's merely a question of planting more olive plants, where the climate is more favourable.
It's not, because as you've seen...
It's an evolution.
No, as you've seen all over... well, exactly so. As you've seen all over the northern Mediterranean, last summer and this summer, and for summers to come in future, you've seen droughts and fires which have destroyed the olive plots.
There's an absolutely wonderful book called Global Crisis by Geoffrey Parker, the expert on Spanish history and Philip II, explaining the global crisis of the 1640s, and that when the temperature cools at the beginning and the end of the growing season, the effect that you have on agricultural productivity is profound. If you have a slightly warmer temperature at the beginning and the end of the growing season, you have more agricultural produce. We know this from history.
Well, I'm sure you know that. You haven't read George Parker's book, also, rather large book.
Geoffrey Parker. I've read Geoffrey Parker's book, because it's very good.
He describes in great detail in that book exactly what the consequences of a naturally caused change in climate were.
Of getting colder. And that when we warmed up, you had more food and you had a better polity.
But what you're doing here is you're confusing structural climate change and changes in the weather, changes in the temperature. Structural climate change is not the same. Weather goes up and down. Everybody knows
But so does the climate change, because we had the medieval warm period, and we had the cool period at the beginning of the 19th century.
And that changes within bands we well understand that are caused by normal variation.
But it doesn't always, because we've historically had ice ages, so it can go much further.
That's
entirely natural.
And what we're now doing is exactly that sort of thing, unnaturally, by adding... so you're saying if you don't add carbon to the atmosphere, you don't get a change in temperature?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not trying to argue with whether there is an effect of what mankind is doing. What I'm saying is that this is manageable, and some parts of it are actually good, because they increase productivity. As you know, more deaths each year from cold than from heat.
Sorry, you've changed...
but we're talking about things getting warmer. But there are more deaths each year from cold than heat, so things being warmer, people will live.
So what?
Isn't it a good thing that people should live?
There isn't a simple balance sheet where you trade off deaths from cold with deaths from heat. Well, because nobody's written a simple balance sheet like that. There isn't
Well, we know that there are more deaths from cold than from heat. Even the IPCC has admitted that.
No, I don't think the IPCC has said...
They had it in a report 3 years ago.
There is more deaths from
cold than from heat.
What we're trying to do, exactly what we're trying to do...
So things being a little bit warmer isn't the end of the world. It's the climate alarmism that I'm trying to deal with.
But I'm not an alarmist, as you well know. One of the things that was very good for people's health and reduce the number of deaths in this country was a former Conservative government thought it was a very good idea to get out of an industry whose time had passed, the coal industry. I think that was a very good idea to do. I wish they'd finished the job, so we wouldn't have as many people still suffering from air pollution effects as we've got all over the world.
But that was a natural evolution economically, because we had gas power, and if we were fracking, we'd still have an enormous amount of cheap gas, hugely beneficial to the economy and better for the environment.
70% of everything we pay for when we buy fossil fuels ends up as waste heat. I'm deeply in favour of using the free energy from the sun and the wind.
But that's always going to be the case, and the most efficient way of using the sun, as Matthew Ridley has pointed out, is to grow crops.
Well, I mean, Matthew Ridley, they think that. I don't know why Matt Ridley thinks that, but I certainly don't agree with him.
All right, well, I'll let you have the last word, because it's always such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much to Tom. A Labour Cabinet Minister. Shouldn't really surprise us, has opposed one of my policies. Find out why in a moment. And don't forget the great Brexit showdown debate for this evening's grand finale. Well, I'll also give you the Somerset cricket score as an even grander finale.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Janis Joplin shot to fame in 1967, but after releasing 3 albums, she was dead 3 years later at the age of 27, having overdosed on heroin.
Yes, very, very brief life, but towering influence. People like Pink in the modern day have said that she is the influence. But she was around so briefly, I guess, burned very brightly and a very troubled soul. And what we've got is A Night with Janis Joplin, the musical. And I think a lot of the problems, it's been getting very mixed reviews, and I think the problem is with this subtitle, the musical. That does it no justice at all.
Really?
It's staggering, stunning in an audience. So what we have is A Night With. It's as if she's in concert. She's sitting on the stage, she's swinging from a bottle, and she's singing and giving us little memories, thoughts on life.
I think I see where you're going, because some critics have said it's a fantastic individual performance that sits in an empty vessel of a show.
Yeah.
And you're saying that that's because the expectations of what the show is have been wrong.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that it's obviously a very loving show. There's very little reference to drugs. There's a bit of a throwaway comment. So we don't really look at the demons. What we do is we explore womanhood very powerfully, but also the blues.
How long do we have to see this?
This one it's on until September the 28th. It's on at the Peacock, which is just down by Aldwych in London.
Quite a small auditorium, actually.
No, it's a big auditorium. So the Peacock is it's a bit of a barn of a room. And again, I would say this show might be better in a slightly smaller venue, but I cannot recommend the performances highly enough.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about Lammy's Global Clean Energy Alliance, and the Mail-Moggs have come hot foot into the office. David Lammy, according to Mike, has had a long time to consider his maiden speech as Foreign Secretary, which makes it all the more worrying that he's a mile wide of his supposed zone of concern. Does he know about Russia, China, Iran, North Korea and terrorism? The Labour front bench is the worst I've ever seen, and Mr Lammy fits into the group very appropriately. And Rob says, the problem with equating climate change with terrorism is that the assumption is made that it is human in origin, not proven. Goodbye free speech on these matters. According to the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, it was bizarre of me to point out the economic benefits of people returning to work in the office. However, at least the private sector, driven by a service and profit motive, has more sense. Amazon is demanding its white-collar employees return to full-time office work, yet the public sector, unsurprisingly, is slower to consider any kind of economic advantage, with GPs only working 26 hours a week and junior doctors threatening yet another series of strikes. Socialism naturally rejects the philosophy of hard work. Well, I'm joined now by my most pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Lazar. Matthew, let me bring you in first, because actually there's a very good piece in the Times Online setting out all the statistical studies that have been done that show that working in the office is more productive. The Secretary of State, Jonathan Reynolds, has simply got this wrong. He's made it up.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what Johnny Reynolds is trying to do as part of this, as part of the package, is give people the right to have a conversation with their employer about it. It isn't a right to work from home.
But they already have a right to talk to their employer about it.
But no, they have the right to talk about flexible working. This includes working, so it extends that to include the conversation, to include where you work, as well as the flexibility of the hours you work, which is the previous right that you enjoy. I mean, I believe in a healthy mix, and I also think it's very important to people like Johnny Reynolds, who's an old friend of mine. Don't forget that for the vast majority of workers, they can't work from home because they can't work from home if you're a nurse, a police officer, or a cleaner.
Or a plumber.
That's such an important point. During COVID, I was leader of the House of Commons, and I was in, and the Speaker was in, and the Clerk of the Commons was in. Other than us, really, it was the cleaners and the security people, and I was so impressed because they were the ones still coming in on the tube, at that point still thinking they were taking a risk, and basically the highest paid and the lowest paid were the only ones going in. But for us, it was easier because we were basically walking in. We didn't have to use public transport.
I mean, look, I think, Labour needs to remember that most union members are in either blue-collar jobs or they're in frontline public sector jobs like nurses or teachers, who therefore do physically have to go in, COVID aside. So I think it's important that they remember it. I think it's OK to have the conversation, but I think Johnny got the tone. He got a bit carried away by plunging his attack on you, Jacob, because, it's perfectly OK to have a conversation, but as we've seen, working in the office is going to remain a key part of white-collar workers, and there are tens of millions of workers for whom it's just it's not a relevant conversation.
Calvin?
Well, Mr. Reynolds, I decided that he seemed to become an expert after 3 months into how businesses operate. So I decided to have a quick look at his Wikipedia. And, I'm quite a bright guy. I don't deny that. But one thing that does become clear is he worked for the council. He was a spad to a Labour MP, and he almost became a solicitor. He was a trainee solicitor, but didn't become one until he decided to involve himself full-time in politics. He actually knows sweet FA about business, how they operate, the terrible aspects of business, like flogging yourself to death, like failing to get a sales when your competitor does, with the fact that the idea that everybody's now going to be able to compress their hours, which is going to go through. So if you're on a 40-hour week or 36-hour week and you do this, that and the other, not only will you be working from home, you'll be basically, I tell you what, I've done 3 12-hour days, that's my lot, right? And the idea that our productivity is going to go like that, which Labour correctly, and I enjoy this aspect of them, constantly talking about our productivity's got to go up because we need growth. We need growth in order to pay for some of these mad ideas, and we need growth to pay for more doctors, clearly, right? That is never going to happen. I do not believe that these kinds of changes that are going to take place in the workplace are actually going to create the growth which this country desperately needs.
Well, and if doctors are only working, GPs on average, 26 hours a week, that is no wonder people can't get to see a GP. We've increased the number of doctors, but they're working fewer hours.
So why don't we say, as part of the contract to become a doctor, we're investing 5 or 6 years into you of our money, you have to work a 5-day week. It's not as though there's not demand there. What's happened is that the ladies, now this will get everybody going, have married well. Right? So they say to themselves, right, well, I'm on 110 grand. I can make myself 65 to 70. Fortunately, the old man works for private equity, or he's the headmaster of this, or he's doing something like that, and he's making 120 himself. We've got 200 a year coming in, and that way I can see the kids and I don't have to do it. Why do we have to accept that the tail is wagging the dog? If we had him... Or do it my way. Scrap the idea of the NHS, which is clearly with everyone working around, and why don't we go over to insurance, and that way they can earn as much money as they like.
But let's go back to Labour's position, because it seems to me that everything Labour's doing isn't actually encouraging work. So you give the junior doctors lots more money, but you don't expect any reform in working practice from them. Ditto train drivers. Now you say people should have the right to work from home. It seems to be an anti-work, anti-enterprise culture.
Well, I mean, one of the first things that the new Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall, did within her first week is say we need a plan to get Britain back to work. I mean, I have to disagree with your introduction, Jacob, when you said that socialists don't believe in hard work. The very name of our party, we are the party of Labour. We are the party of hard work. I mean, I think on the junior doctors... I don't understand why they didn't negotiate some concessions from the train drivers. I think that was the most egregious example. On the junior doctors, the idea was to get them back to work, and then you're going to look at the NHS as a whole, because as we saw last week,
the junior doctors have immediately said we want more money.
Well, and they're not going to get it. So you know.
You say that. Are you honestly saying? I don't know how.
And they didn't get all they wanted.
Right, they're saying we want this, we want that. And by the way, they've been clever. They are prepared. And this comes as a shock to me. I wonder whether it comes as a shock to a member of the Labour Party. They are prepared, effectively, to in some way injure the very people that they're supposed to be looking after, right? And they're prepared to do that. That came as a total shock to me. I dislike them intensely now. They are no longer. The nurses, they've, to my mind, have gone up there because they've carried on flogging themselves to death, right? So what do you make of this? What does Labour make of people who make, on average, they talk about this £13.50 and everything. It's cobblers. Once they've done 5 or 6 years, they're on damn near 70, 80,000. They know that.
I think that the government has to be acutely aware, as you said with GPs in the 20s. I've always actually asked the question, what does a GP do all day? Well, now we've found they're doing that many days. Yeah. So that's the answer to the question. Yeah. What I was very pleased about last week was both Wes Streeting and the Prime Minister made absolutely clear to everybody in the NHS that things are going to have to change.
But Jonathan Reynolds' message is such a mixed message, because if you're a GP on 26 hours and you now hear that the government thinks that there's lots of productivity from working from home, you're not going to think, actually, I should go up to 35 hours, are you? You're thinking the government's in favour of me carrying on with this easier working life.
Well, we had to do other things like sort the pension, be careful on the pensions, because that was what pushed a lot of people down, because the more hours they were doing, they were then being penalised.
The Conservatives dealt with that.
Which you did. But we also need to sort out, the whole nation needs to sort out childcare, so it's not just for doctors, but we need childcare that is more affordable.
That's important. It's not only that they're...
It's not, but if you look at the Scandinavians who have the highest percentage of people in the workforce in the world, it's because more women do more hours because they've got childcare, which is effectively free, if in return for which paid for through taxes. So there's lots of things like you can do.
All right, well, let's hope so. But I think Jonathan Reynolds was wrong. So thank you to my panel. In a moment, I'll be giving you the inside story of what it was like to be offered freebies as a Member of Parliament, plus the great Brexit debate between two of the most vociferous voices of the debate. And what will the weather be like in Manchester tomorrow for Somerset versus Lancashire? Oh.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Dry for many of us over the next 24 hours with clear skies, although overnight it will turn somewhat cloudier in some places, notably towards the south and southeast because of the winds coming in around an area of high pressure and arriving from the east. Those easterly winds will increase the cloud overnight across East Anglia, the Midlands and the southeast, eventually reaching parts of East Wales by the early hours. Further north, we lose the cloud across northern Scotland, but under any clear spells across Scotland and Northern Ireland, as well as Northern England, a few mist and fog patches could form by dawn. However, it's across southern parts of the country where we'll see the cloudiest skies. Away from the cloud, a chilly start once again with temperatures in the single figures, but under the sheet of cloud, a milder start compared with Tuesday, albeit with grey skies. The clearest skies will be across Northern Ireland, Northern England and much of Scotland. In sheltered spots, away from main urban areas and away from hilltops, temperatures could be as low as 3 to 6 Celsius, and any mist and fog could last until 9 or 10 a.m. before disappearing. Once the mist and fog does disappear, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England sees once again a beautiful sunny day, and across central and southern parts through the afternoon the cloud will disappear back to the east coast where it could linger in places, and then another sunny day is expected for the vast majority. 24 or 25 Celsius possible in places, feeling warm in the sun, but there'll be less sun around on Thursday morning, a bit more cloud across eastern, central and southern England as well as East Wales. Once again, that cloud should retreat back to the east coast through the afternoon, but in some places it could stick around for most of the day. Friday, plenty of showers developing across England and Wales, drier and sunnier further north.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about working from home and Labour not really wanting anybody to do any work. And Elizabeth says, I still haven't had a satisfactory answer to this question, which is why we apparently have 9 million economically inactive. However, we only apparently have 900,000 jobs available. Please, can somebody explain the maths? Or am I being stupid? No, you're not being at all stupid. Vacancies are advertised vacancies. If more people go into the workforce, you often find more jobs are created. And Greg says, working from home culture is just another example of how we now have stronger social bonds with screens than people. It will end badly. Yes, now, if any of my children are watching, the only screen you should watch is GB News, rather than going beep, beep, playing Roblox or whatever it is. Anyway, reports have suggested 8 people have been killed and 2,700 injured, including members of the Hezbollah terrorist group, when their communication pages exploded. You can see here footage appearing to show the moment one of the devices exploded. It's being described as the biggest security breach so far in nearly a year of conflict with Israel. A journalist for the Reuters news agency reported seeing ambulances rushing through Beirut's southern suburbs amidst widespread panic, with explosions continuing for 30 minutes after the initial blasts. Well, I'm joined still by my panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Lazar. Matthew, is this a very clever move by the Israeli secret services, one imagines, to take out a large number of terrorists, or is this a dangerous hostile act that will have repercussions?
So I think, I wish it was the first. I fear it will be perceived by many as the latter of those two options, because in the past, the Israelis have done some amazing things. I mean, I've just been reading about in the 70s, they, in the days of much less sophisticated technology, they kind of put an exploding pedestal on a PLO member's phone in Paris so that it blew up, and that was very targeted. The problem with this, as we've seen, is that it's because it was in so many pages appear to have exploded, and therefore, and it wasn't like they knew where people were going to be. I mean, this footage we've seen is people in a market. Obviously, there's then collateral injuries, including, we understand, a child, which is only going to play into the narrative of indiscriminate action, which is what is playing to those who don't have Israel's best interests at heart.
Kelvin, for what it's worth, the Israeli government hasn't yet commented, but it doesn't seem likely that it could be anybody else.
And by the way, nobody should drop a tear over this kind of action by Israel. Let's be honest about it. Both Hezbollah and Iran itself, and Hamas, by the way, as part of their major central policy, is that Israel is wiped off the face of the earth. OK? So when you get actions like this, what you have to say to yourself is, well, actually, showing the other side that there are repercussions to having that policy is fantastic. After all, Hezbollah have been firing missiles into across the Israeli border now, non-stop for about 3 or 4 weeks now. And so I applaud what they've done. I am astonished that there are brains that appear to be in Israel, which appear to be larger than brains elsewhere in the world. And without those brains, would Israel exist today? They want to see Israel off the face of the earth, and I am delighted that there are brains out there that are defeating them.
But are there brains in other parts of the world, I'm thinking particularly of Russia, that could use this on our smartphones to attack us? If you can make a pager explode, which is quite small compared to a smartphone.
But honestly, what is a pager, Grandad? I mean, I don't know anybody in our world, and there's all kinds of ages and whatever. I mean, you were saying off camera that you were back in 2001. You were talking about it when you were 17 or 18 working for the Blair government or acting for
That was only last year, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Oh, Jacob, I'll come back. So, I mean, I think there's an issue about because pages are... I mean, what's extraordinary about this is that Hezbollah told all their operatives, to use their word, to stop using smartphones because they were worried that the Israelis were harvesting all their data. So they went for the simplistic, old-school pager. But because it's so simplistic and old school, it appears that such a big targeting has been able to take place.
But doesn't it make you worry about electric cars and the chips that are made in countries that are not friendly to us, and that some of the more sort of paranoid stories about how modern technology can be turned against you, this is a hint that they may just possibly be true?
Well, I agree to the extent that we need cyber independence. So actually, in the new European Commission announced today by Ursula von der Leyen, there is actually now a commissioner for effectively to onshore, cyber attacks to try and into cyber technology to try and avoid this happening. And actually, I agree with the last government taking I can never pronounce it, but that Chinese firm out of the Huawei, yes, out of the the nation's core infrastructure was vital.
Well, in other news, Sir Keir Starmer had a rather feeble rebuttal prepared in response to the Donergate or Frockgate allegations. All Member of Parliaments get gifts. Well, I hate to argue with the Prime Minister, but it's not true. I didn't accept any of this lavish hospitality as a Member of Parliament, as there's always an intent to influence. Just because lots of people doing it doesn't make it right. And for one so pious, it really is surprising that the Reverend Starmer does not abide by this. Well, back to my panel. Matthew, he really has blundered here, hasn't he?
Well, I think that they need to be careful about appearing to be tone deaf. I mean, on the breaking of the rules, the Parliamentary Commission is not investigating it. It seems that they asked the Parliament, they asked the relevant, the office in the House of Commons if they should declare Lady Starmer's the gift of Lady Starmer, and were told no. So that appears to be why the Parliamentary Commissioner is not pursuing it. However, it's not a great look when you're taking away millions of people's winter fuel allowance.
Angela Eagle, senior minister, wouldn't defend him today.
I've been doing more defensive here than the ministers. I think I might bring number 10 and say, come on, guys,
but that's my peerage. That's a really bad sign. Yeah. I was only ever wheeled out when Boris was Prime Minister, when nobody else was defending him. You could tell it was trouble when I was the one going out, because everyone else had said no.
Yeah, and actually, in Labour Party terms, that's very important, because Angela Eagle is a much-respected figure inside the party. She briefly ran for leader of the party in an attempt to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. She's a kind of senior and respected figure. It's not like it's a very junior person panicking. It's, Angela knew what she was doing when she did that. So yes. there is clearly disquiet out there about people having to defend what they think is very hard to defend, if not quite indefensible.
It is hard to defend, but the thing that struck me as so odd is I'm not by nature a jealous man, but I really wouldn't want other men buying my wife dresses. I just don't think that would be proper.
Yes, I think the orientation of Lord Ali is such that you wouldn't have to be too concerned, to be honest. But putting that to one side, it's a shocking error, right? It was bad enough. I mean, what bloke wants another bloke to buy him in suits, let alone glasses or anything? I mean, that was ridiculous. And honestly, they were playing a very cunning game there. He knew full well that that this was crossing the line, and he was hoping that it could all be secreted away somewhere. So he allowed it to be known. After all, he was using the Sunday Times. The Sunday Times said vote Labour. So they placed the story with them saying, yes, he did accept the 20 grand. Why would he do that? Why would he do it? If he honestly thought there was nothing to worry about, why didn't he say it during the general election? By the way, I just thought I'd tell you, as the next Prime Minister of your country, that I've just accepted 20 grand's worth of clothes. And by the way, the missus accepted 5,000.
Well, there's also, I actually was thinking earlier that I don't know why it wasn't done through the Labour Party directly. So obviously the Labour Party supplies, as all parties supply things for their leaders to actually help them, to help them achieve it.
Donation to the Labour Party.
Yes, absolutely.
And the unapologetic nature that this surprises me too. First of all, Lady Starmer going out yesterday in another free dress, albeit borrowed. didn't seem the right.
I think that she was between a rock and a hard
tone.
place yesterday, because if she hadn't gone, it would have become a huge story. The dress was borrowed, and that was to promote.
He likes his freebies, doesn't he? He was at the top quartile of people with their hand out between 2019 and 24. It was 76,000 quid's worth, right? He likes it, right? Takes the missus and the kids. I don't really blame him on this, to see Taylor Swift, right? Well, that in itself was only about 4,000 quid. No, he views about it. After all, he's a lawyer.
But
he's a lawyer.
He says it has irked me that we all did it. Well, look, I got invited to cricket, which I love, and I got invited to the opera, which I love.
You were a wealthy man.
Of course I did.
You would be...
I paid for
okay,
my...
you would be... How many are there?
Tickets.
630 MPs, are there? 650. Right, you would be one among 650, honestly.
No, everybody who gives you something like that wants something where there's a tip, there's a tap.
Yeah.
And politicians should know that. There is not a disinterested free pair of spectacles.
Well, I think they're thinking, just to put their point of view, they're thinking that they would take that there are lots of people who might want to give you something because they want something in return. Ali doesn't want anything in return. He's a Labour peer. He's at the heart of the Labour Party. He's not trying to buy influence. Well, he's already got. I mean, he's the chief fundraiser.
He wants to be in sight. He wants the Downing Street pass.
He can WhatsApp the Prime Minister whenever he likes without buying him suits.
That is true. I know him. He's quite a decent guy.
He's a lovely
I don't blame him. Well, the bloke I blame is Starmer for accepting it.
And I do
why does he feel he needs a suit
when he's not a poor man?
He's on 166 grand a year now, right? He's allegedly worth 10 million quid. His missus, by the way, a working woman, right, really committed to the NHS, jolly good, 50,000 a year. We're not talking about minimum pay, 11.44. We're talking about people who've got a few bob and presumably know the dangers of taking money under these circumstances.
And I still think it's odd to allow somebody else to buy your wife's clothes. But there we go. Thank you to my panel. After the messages from our sponsors, yes, we have to have those, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. The great Brexit debate awaits amidst a new lefty report that claims Brexit has damaged the UK economy.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
A furious online debate has been sparked after, well, let's just say a rather large man. I mean, he really was big. Was snapped trying to fit into his seat on the plane.
It's led to some to ask whether obese passengers should have to pay for extra plane seats so they don't inconvenience others.
Some say, though, that's cruel. So should plus-size passengers pay extra for plane seats? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, who's in Stratford-upon-Avon, and the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, who's in beautiful Harrogate. Good to see you both this morning. Sarah, what do you think?
Well, we've had this debate before with Steve and I, to be fair, and I think it's one of those things where planes are just not fit for purpose anymore. So people's bodies have been growing over the years. We know this, the obesity rates are increasing, etc. But what's happening to planes is the seats are decreasing in size. So they're just not fit for purpose and not fit for the population. So I think it's just one of these things where we need to be more empathetic to people, that they're trying to fit into an environment that isn't shaped for them at all. So I think we do need to kind of say, well, what's right here? Is it the person not being able to fit in the seat, or is it the seat not being fit for purpose for the person? And I think we need to really, look at things from that perspective as well. Instead of thinking the person's doing something wrong, how about the environment might be doing something wrong?
Steve?
It's not about blaming, but the message you can't put out, in my opinion, is that it's okay to be obese and don't worry about it. You see, what I'm saying here is free plane seats. If you're offering free plane seats, an extra seat, that's going to normalise obesity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Has Brexit damaged UK trade? Well, a report by Aston University Business School claims it has. The report, conducted between 2021 and 2023, calculated that UK exports to the EU were down 27% and imported goods were 32% lower than they would have been if Brexit had not occurred. As we know, statistics can be misleading. Subsequent analysis of the said report seems to miss out on some key observations that Catherine McBride noted today on Twitter. Well, I'm joined now by the self-same Catherine McBride, the economist and fellow at the Centre for Brexit Policy, as well as an old friend of the programme, Liz Webster, founder of Save British Farming and a former Lib Dem candidate. Catherine, let me go to you first. Why are these figures not ones that we can just rely on and say, look, trade's fallen by nearly 30%, and this is fundamentally a bad thing, and hold our hands up and say we Brexiteers are guilty?
Because trade hasn't fallen. These numbers are against their expectations. So this is against where they thought we would be if we had stayed, but they're actually making that up, OK? No one really knows where we would have been if we had stayed, but they actually divide it amongst each product line because they're using HS codes. They've kind of, which is standardised system codes, which is how we price tariffs. All trade agreements have rules of origin, and that means that countries that are not party to the agreement cannot sell their goods via your trade agreement and get the discount, get the trade liberalisation. Now, this includes clothing and footwear under the TCA, the agreement we have with the EU. They must be wholly manufactured in the UK. This also covers things like nuts. The BBC reporter, who I think is a bit nuts, Faisal Islam, was tweeting today saying our nut exports are down by 70%. Well, those nut exports were first imported into the UK, and they include cashews, coconuts, almonds, what was the other one? Brazil nuts. We, for a long time, have imported nuts here, like 25,000 tonnes worth, and then about 2,000 tonnes would have gone to Ireland. Possibly gone also to France, but more likely just gone to Ireland, just dividing up the import. Now, if we still export those nuts to Ireland, they're not counted as a UK export. They're counted as an export from Brazil or India or Malaysia or wherever they came from. Exactly the same nuts. Yes.
To Ireland. They could come on a ship into the UK and go into a smaller ship to Ireland, and they used to count as a UK export and they now don't.
Exactly, because the EU has always had an interest in miscounting goods. So we used to call it the Rotterdam effect. So goods that were landed in the big ports in Europe, usually in Belgium or the Netherlands, that were then re-exported to us, we counted as imports from the Netherlands and Belgium.
And this is very important, isn't it? Because it's why prior to Brexit, it looked as if we did an enormous trade with Holland. But in fact, we didn't, because that was just goods passing through a port.
Well, that is part of the rules of origin. And because we left the single market, we've lost that opportunity. But in terms of what it means for UK manufacturing, of which farming is the largest sector, food production, it's no surprise this report to farmers. And you come from Somerset, Jacob, you lost your seat in the election recently. I know many farmers down there, and many are jolly upset with the fact that they were promised it was going to be a booming time for farming with Brexit, and it's been cataclysmic. I mean, obviously, Catherine is Australian and not British. She thinks that cattle can't be reared. Organic cattle can't be reared in the
Let's get back to the report.
But what I'm saying is...
Just sort of lobbing insults at Catherine for being Australian is completely irrelevant. Australia is a close ally of ours, even if they're occasionally winging cricket.
But when we're talking about
so
British
let's get back to the report.
farming...
Have exports and imports fallen by this amount, or is that misleading?
Other reports have shown the same, that year on year,
so we've
got less going out and less coming in.
You think a Brazil nut going from the UK to Ireland is a British export?
I'm not going to split hairs over
We're not going to get into the
nut.
Detail.
Jacob, I'm interested in...
Is this typical of Remainers not getting into the detail?
Why are you not interested in British food? Because that's what I'm... Save British Farming is about saving British food. And I love Brazil nuts, I love eating them, but I'm really interested in British beef, British lamb, British pork, British
terrible
food.
News for you, Liz. This report absolutely blows you out of the water because it actually divides up. It gives you 21 different sectors. There are 99, so they left out a lot. But it includes foodstuffs, and it hardly dropped at all. In both our exports and our imports are virtually the same, and this is by value. So, in fact, it's a proportion of to the EU versus total trade. No, listen to it. So, meanwhile, this is a proportion of our EU exports compared to our total exports. So the inflation will be the same to both destinations. However, the big things we do is not farming. Liz is totally wrong saying it's our biggest manufacturing sector. Our biggest manufacturing sector is machinery and mechanical appliances, and we export it, and it's a fifth of our exports, over a fifth of our exports. Foodstuffs in total is less than 5%. They have the numbers on this report. You should read it before you say silly things. And when you look at our whole GVA that the food industry gives us, most of that is in restaurants and employment. The farming sector is a fraction of that. Of the 140 billion that they claim in GVA, only 10 billion comes from farming.
The farming, food and drink sector is the largest sector in the country, and Brexit...
No, it's not.
The Brexit promised a golden...
It's not even vaguely true.
Jacob...
It just isn't.
True. It's just not true.
All
Read the
economists will agree...
No,
British
they don't.
economists,
You're just making that up.
Farming, food and drink is the largest manufacturing sector in the country. But I'm not going to split hairs over this with you because
you're including
this is about
Brexit,
of which Jacob was part of the campaign.
I'm very enthusiastic for.
And you promised that farming was going to boom. And farming is not booming. You can look at all of the data for farming here in Britain. It is actually collapsing for a variety of different reasons.
Well, dairy farmers are doing much better because the milk price has gone up.
The dairy farmers are actually quitting and getting out of the business like no tomorrow.
It's not true either. DEFRA publishes all these figures. The statistics are available. Our meat production is virtually unchanged over the last 10 years. And this is not our exports, this is what we make and what we're eating ourselves. So our imports from non-EU countries is minuscule, even though you've ranted on Twitter about Namibia.
No, Catherine, it is at the moment, the trade deals that we've negotiated opened us up to more imports from countries further away.
Yes, but we're
and
not
the quotas at the moment
them.
are quite limited.
Which is
but
great.
They're going to get bigger as every year goes on.
Importing from other countries is great from consumers because it keeps prices down. Well, thank you to Catherine and Liz. Up next is Patrick Christie's. Patrick, what is on your bill of fare this evening?
Well, we've got loads on. This time yesterday, we started a fundraiser for Friends of the Elderly, and already that has raised way more than £100,000. So we're going to be talking to another pensioner who, as it currently stands, is going to be really struggling this winter just to try to raise a bit of money for our greatest generation. In other news, though, Keir Starmer, well, he's got his hand out, hasn't he? Accepting £75,000 worth of gifts and all of that stuff. Obviously, you want to compare that to how pensioners are feeling at the moment, don't you, I think? But David Lammy as well, is he right that climate change poses a bigger risk to terrorism? Go and tell that to the victims of the Manchester Arena bombing. And I've got an exclusive from you about migrant gangs, violent gangs in Calais.
Oh, as always, a fascinating programme, Patrick. That's coming up after the weather, where once again we hope for sunshine in Manchester, where Somerset is playing Lancashire at Old Trafford. After we bowled Lancashire out for a paltry 140, Somerset then slumped to 146 all out, a lead of just 6, before Lancashire lost one more wicket. 21 wickets in a day. What a day's cricket. Let's hope for good weather tomorrow. Will the ECB be inspecting the pitch? Well, in Somerset, the weather will be perfect. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Dry for many of us over the next 24 hours with clear skies, although overnight it will turn somewhat cloudier in some places, notably towards the south and southeast because of the winds coming in around an area of high pressure and arriving from the east. Those easterly winds will increase the cloud overnight across East Anglia, the Midlands and the southeast, eventually reaching parts of East Wales by the early hours. Further north, we lose the cloud across northern Scotland, but under any clear spells across Scotland and Northern Ireland, as well as Northern England, a few mist and fog patches could form by dawn. However, it's across southern parts of the country where we'll see the cloudiest skies. Away from the cloud, a chilly start once again with temperatures in the single figures, but under the sheet of cloud, a milder start compared with Tuesday, albeit with grey skies. The clearest skies will be across Northern Ireland, Northern England and much of Scotland. In sheltered spots, away from main urban areas and away from hilltops, temperatures could be as low as 3 to 6 Celsius, and any mist and fog could last until 9 or 10 a.m. before disappearing. Once the mist and fog does disappear, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England sees once again a beautiful sunny day, and across central and southern parts through the afternoon the cloud will disappear back to the east coast where it could linger in places, and then another sunny day is expected for the vast majority. 24 or 25 Celsius possible in places, feeling warm in the sun, but there'll be less sun around on Thursday morning, a bit more cloud across eastern, central and southern England as well as East Wales. Once again, that cloud should retreat back to the east coast through the afternoon, but in some places it could stick around for most of the day. Friday, plenty of showers developing across England and Wales, drier and sunnier further north.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
I've got some really good news for you. You've won £30,000.
£30,000 cash? Oh my God, I'm going to cry. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered.